Morning from Area 51 Raceway. So we're here at the workbench and we have our model selected. We're going to be doing on our part 2 for the hot rod build to HRW. And right here I have a mod rod Boss Roadster from AMT, and it's a 2-in-1 kit. So you have two cars you could make out of a hot rod. You can make the old 4-cylinder style and put hot rod wheels on this if you wanted to, or you can make the modified one, which is right here with a V8 engine, maybe something like that on the box art. Box art is something that's pretty much lost. This is really nice, and there's just a lot of different things you could do, and it opens up a lot of the creativity stuff to be done in this series. Now remember, just stay within the rules, which is 1915 to 1930, 20. I want to say 35. I always forget. I think it's 35. So you got to stay within those years. 1915, 1935, I'm sure that's it. And then obviously, stick with the links that Harry has posted on the rules page along with the video. And there's links at the bottom of the page that you click for all the individual parts. Now, in the first part of the video, I'm preferably going to use 1/8 axle. It doesn't mean you can't, you could only use 1/8 axle. I want to reiterate this. There is 332nd axles available for if you want to go 332nd axle, that's fine. They make some inserts and they make some of the steely wheels if you want to go that route, and you can still put obviously baby moons if you want to. It's up to you. I just going to preferably for this build use a 1/8 axle because that's what I want to use. Just my preference right now. Probably on the next model kit I'll probably maybe go 332nd axle. I don't know, but I'm not building that on camera. I'm doing this for people that want to do something hopefully simple to them. I'm going to try and make it as simple as possible, trying to make it not too difficult. But I want you to remember to always ask me if you need any help. I'm always on Messenger, and if I don't answer right away on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I will answer you Sunday through Wednesday. That's no problem. Wednesday night, usually after 8 o'clock, I'm in bed because I work 3/12s, so I'll be like inundated with work all those 3 days, because when I get home, I'm pretty much eat and go to sleep and repeat the process 3 days straight. But it gives me 4 days off, which is great, so I could do some of these things and catch up on a few things around the house and for all my personal things along with the hobby I have here. So remember, any questions or anything, please let me know. So we're going to go over here and we're going to open the box and take the kit out, and we're going to start building a chassis. Okay, here we are at the bench. So I wanted to tell you, this is an incredible kit. And the reason why I say that is that you have a build for 2 vehicles. So you could essentially build 2 cars out of this entire kit. And they really provide a lot of options, actually 3 cars. So if I open this page, and you can see they show the engine, which is the stock vintage, and then the street rod one. And then they show the chassis, which is stocks racing, and the street rod one. And this is what's kind of cool. So when you see this chassis design, this is kind of what we're kind of going to mimic. So when you take this out of the package, you could copy this to an extent. Obviously, you're not going to have that for because you don't want your motor bracket, and your motor bracket will be there and stuff. But this is what's really unique about this stuff, is that everything is here for you to copy if you wanted to copy this. Now, I don't know if you guys know Shotgun Dave, but he's got his own small Facebook page. And when he was doing his, and he does a lot of these builds, he kind of basically did this. He kind of narrowed it here and how he made his chassis. And it's pretty cool how these model kits just provide a lot of stuff. AMT does an excellent job. And then you can see the different wheels available too. So you actually have some baby moons already if you want to put some baby moons. They're in here, and I'll show them to you in a minute. And then you have the stock wheels if you wanted to leave front stock wheels. And there's a lot of options here to be very, very how would you say, unique in your build. So I'm going to turn this over, and this is what I'm going to show you. So there's essentially 3 cars you could build out of this if you wanted to. So here is the stock vintage racing one, right? And you have the old style, if you'd wanted to even go that route, but I would put hot rod wheels on this and it would still look cool. And then you have the mod rod version, which has the top on it and the interior, and if you wanted to incorporate this, you could. You just have to cut some stuff out. You'd have to do a little bit of work. And then you have this one, which is the the Avenger version, which is a roadster, and well, it can be a roadster unless you want to put the top. It gives you that option if you want to do that, and with a blown engine and everything. So these parts are all in this kit, which is super cool, man. This is a really good kit. I'm very impressed with AMT. They always make great model kits. They also provide decals, which I haven't even opened yet, which I don't know what exactly these are in here, because let's find out, because I'm kind of curious now. Let me put that dangerous blade over there, and we'll pull this out. And I mean, there's numbers there already, stripes. I mean, that's a pretty cool decal. I mean, there's so much provided in for your, you have your decals ready to go too. And this is a great decal sheet from AMT. You can see how nice and how they have the nice shine on them to them, and they'd probably just do a real good job going on, and really easy because they feel a little pretty thick. So here's, your kit. So you got a lot here. I mean, there's a lot to go by. Here's the vintage, the mod rod one, and then you have your roadster style like this, and you have the other body. So I mean, the sky's the limit. They give you a lot of stuff. As far as wheels go, you have the typical steel wheels, and in here, right here, you have the baby moons. So I mean, there's so much stuff here. French bucket headlights here, the grill. All this could be incorporated into building your slot car. There's a firewall too that's chromed out if you want to leave it chrome. All the engine parts, and then they give you the glass for everything, and then the clear Lexan glass for, I'm not sure what that's for, but we'll have to find out. I have to read more of the instructions. But here's the headlights and all that, and the tail lights are in there somewhere. Let me grab this box. And you have these tires we're not going to use, obviously. The tail lights in here, so the tail lights right there. So I mean, there's a ton of things you could do with this kit, and I'm just telling you, scratch building is super fun, because with kits like this, they give you so much options to do stuff. So what I really want to do is use this body, is what I'm going toward here. And I like this style right here because it's open, and I could put a tray interior like Tom Edmondson did. He did a real cool one, and it's the cover photo of it. You can see he put a cover, and then he put a roll bar that went over the tray driver, and it came out really nice. As far as figures putting in here, I don't know any figures at the moment. I would have to research that more, but I'm probably going to do a tray. Doing a full interior can be a little bit more work, but I'm going to keep this simple and keep it with the tray interior for the guys that are first time building these cars. So, and what I usually do is take this out, and it's like, again, there's a lot of stuff here. And here's the hood, which we won't use because that is not something I'm interested in doing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this out, and you can do this with a blade. You don't have to do it with a Dremel. You just have to do it carefully and don't cut yourself. And this should cut out easily. And then this is where I'm going to set my body width, or my axle width, to this, and I want to make it hot rod style. And obviously, as long as it's not wider than 3 1/4, you should be good. So I'm going to use some fat tires for this thing, man. This thing's going to look badass, I think, when I try and get it, most of it complete, in to the video series here. So there's a lot of trimming you'll have to do, and the most important thing you should have really in your arsenal of tools is the X-Acto blade. X-Acto blade is something that you could trim things off like that, and then you could sand it with some sandpaper. And this is just the extrusion from the plastic, obviously. And I have to cut this out right here. I'm going to saw this all down and kind of get this nice and rounded. So I mean, X-Acto blade's a good tool to have. If you have a pair of snippers, if you could get some, are also good as well when you're trying to break pieces off the tree of the model. So for example, I'm going to do this without opening the bag. If I wanted to cut this, this is what this is good for, because you could get to those small parts where you won't, by doing this, you won't break them up, kind of ruin them, because sometimes they can be delicate. But these are good tools to have and to start out with. So we're going to start our chassis, and this is one thing too, is make sure you kind of keep your mess out of I try and keep as organized as possible, because you see things go all over the place. I usually put the boxes down here and clear my work area to make sure I have enough room to do stuff. And what I'm going to start out with is is this with this. And my choice of the rails for the chassis is going to be 8262. Now, you could essentially have to size this out for your model when you're doing it. So when we get our motor bracket over here on the soldering block, and when I get this cut, and when I get the axle cut also, that's the very first thing you want to do, excuse me, is cut the axle size to make sure you got the good width and you're not too wide and stuff, and to give it that nice hot rod look. And then we're going to trim this as well. Now for cutting this, you could use a small miter saw. It's a little miter saw that you get on Amazon. I do not have it here. It's up in the box somewhere because I don't use it anymore. When I first started, it's like a little box and it's got a little handsaw. You could buy something like that from Amazon fairly cheap. You could use your Dremel. I highly recommend getting a Dremel, and you could use a cutting wheel and cut the piece. Or you could go to Harbor Freight, and they have these little mini saws that are available for cutting small things, and they're only like, I think, under $40. And I have one in the garage, and usually what I'll do is go downstairs to the garage and make my my sizes here and then cut it. I don't have it up here. I could bring it up here. It's just the thing, brass kind of tends to go all over the place, so I try not to make a huge mess here. Anything that's involved with brass and metal, I try and keep out of the house. But if you have a space where you could do it, or if you want to do it here, that's fine. You could always use a rag to cover up and you capture all the little metal particles. I have animals, so I don't want anything getting stuck in their paw or anything like that. So, and then if you have children at home, obviously you don't want to leave things out like that where they get hurt. So our first, this is the 8262, and then for the axle we're going to use 8130, which is right here. And then I have a set of axles here that I use for building, and it's going to be 1/8. And then the wheels for my selection that I'm going to pick are going to be the CBD 1610s. I'm going to get up here. I'm going to whack my head on my camera mount. And these are what I'm going to use. The tire selection for this is going to be the Paul Gauge 27-178. These right here are what I'm going to use. This particular one's right here. And we're going to start out with sizing our axle by using a tube cutter. A tube cutter is a real important tool. This is a real great tool to get. It's from Amazon, makes it easier. And after you cut it, I'll show you how to clean it out with the X-Acto knife, or you could use a file. There's different methods. Everybody has a different way of doing stuff. Sometimes they'll use the file, or I'll use an X-Acto blade to clean the edge off, because it will have like a chamfered edge from you cutting it. So why don't we go on, and when I get set up, we'll get started right here. Okay, here we are back at the bench, and we're going to start with getting our width set in here. So like I talked about in the body and stuff, where you want the width of the wheel. Since this is a Roadster, we're going to give it a look of the Roadster. Now remember, it's all about the modeling. The modeling is very important. So if you detail more for modeling and stuff, on the looks of it, it helps it out. Gives you a little bit props for that, man. And I'm just stating that. It's all about the modeling. So we want to get this, in a way that it's going to look good. Because I didn't want to go too wide, which I was playing with. It looked kind of ridiculous for this body. So what I did was I got my 8130 tubing, and I cut this at 3 centimeters. And that's what I'm going to go with on the rear. And I get my bushings, and I'm going to do is get my wheels and tires on that I've selected, and my bushings. I'm going to pre-fit this to see what it looks like. And all you do is visually get an idea of what the car will look like with the wheels on it. And what you'll do is you'll put it on a setup lock like I have over here. All I'm going to do is just lock these down a little so they don't move around. And I'm going to get my front wheels. And what I did was I actually eyeballed this, and I actually got it right, which I'm surprised, because sometimes I have to usually cut another one after I do that. So what I've done was I've got this to where at least it's the same inside width for the front wheels. Now, as I build the chassis, I'm going to see how it looks. And again, you could always go proud. As is always said, it's good to take away than it is to add. So if you want to put it a little bit wider, you can. If you do come out short, you can use shims. That's not a big deal. They make 1/8 shims if you need to correct it. But I'm going to go with this position right here, and I measured this center one, because I have these pieces, these spacers that stick out like about almost half a centimeter. And what I did was I just kind of compensated for that, and I made this at 2.5 centimeters for the front axle. Now this right here is 81/28, and this is basically 5/32 brass tubing. And this is what you'll use for 1/8 axles. It's 5/32 on the inside. You can use the square 81/52, which these are 3/16 as well, 5/32 as well for 1/8 axle. And this is just a piece that I have here. And if you want to use a square one, you can. It's totally up to you. But I'm going to go with the round one. And I'm going to slip this on here and kind of lock it down as well. Now I kind of have a visualization of what they look like, and I'm going on the inside here. So I want these to stick out more, so I want to give it more of that, fat tire look in the back, so that the back of the car has a, that nice fat tire look to it, like roadsters do, as you can see right here. You get that look. I did have one that was longer, and it was sticking out too much, and it was still within the lane, within the width of the car. So your maximum width would be 3 1/4. So we're way under that. We're like 2 5/8 basically, and I could have gone 3, which that's no big deal. If you want to do something like that, that's fine, as long as you stay within the width of what's required on the rules. I want to go over something else also. So I had said in the previous video, the first video, that 17 millimeters tire surface was to be the maximum that they're allowing. I was incorrect with that. It's 18 millimeters of width of the tire. So if you pick these boogers right here, and you find that they're a little bit over 17, don't freak out, because they're allowable. They're allowed on the rules. What will happen is once you shave these down and true them, they're gonna be a little bit narrower and stuff. So anyways, we're going back to what we're talking about. So now I got my rear wheels, and then I got some popsicle sticks to prop the body up, and I'm just going to do this, and I'm going to get my front wheels, and I'm going to kind of visualize where things are going to be, and that looks pretty good. Looks like already starting to look like a hot rod. And what you're doing is you're just getting an idea of what is the position of that is going to be visually, and I do things a lot visually. So with the length of the chassis, you're going to figure, we'll say we'll go with 12 centimeters. Okay, that is about, let's say 4.5. That just rolled forward. And don't worry if you have some sticking out. If it sticks out too long, you cut them too long, and you could go a little bit longer. It's no big deal, because you could always hack those off. And they usually give you like a total length of this 82. This is 82/62, and this is the 3/32 frame that I'm going to be using. So they give you about usually a foot of this stuff. So you could cut this in half to 6 inches, and then you could just start building your chassis. And if you need to chop off, you could chop off. It's no big deal. It is what it is. You're not going to do anything, anything bad or nothing. And so I'm going to use this as the frame rails. Now I can go narrower, which I am kind of thinking of going narrower, but I am not certain at this point. And I kind of look at this more and more and kind of think about it. So if I do go 81/52, which will be probably the ideal really size to go, and I'm changing my mind on the fly here. So this is 5/32. So what I may do is use this instead, because this will look more of the modeling aspect I'm trying to get at. And I could always use these as crossbars on the frame if I want, or use the same one. So I'm going to change my mind here. We're going to go with 5/32, so the 81/52. But you guys, if you want to make them a little thicker, that's fine. I suggest this is the thickest you would want to go. They do make the 82/64, and that's a little bit too wide, and that is that one is 1/8 of an inch wide, and that's a little bit kind of big. But we're going to go with this one instead, because I feel more comfortable with this one, because I think this will look more of a, to me, realistic as a hot rod chassis. So we'll go with 81/52, and what we're going to do is we're going to cut this in half, and we'll start assembling the chassis by putting our motor bracket on there. Okay, here we are. We have our motor bracket, our axle tube, our bushings all set up, and we also have a motor on there. So this is an old motor. If you have your new motor and your new axles, please do not freak out or worry that it's going to get them too hot. The motor and the axles, everything, the brass will be fine. So if you put your new motor in and put your screws in and mount it like this, and there's a purpose for this. So we want the motor bracket to not move around, so we mount the motor so this way this isn't super loose, and it's just better alignment this way if you do it all like that. You see how this stock car corner bracket, then the newer ones, how they're flush because they're flush with the bottom of the motor. When we had the old JK ones, we had to cut a section of it out so that it would be flush. So this is what makes it nicer for scratch building, is that slot car corner stepped it up and made it easier for the user to just not have to do that extra work. So that's why we want it flush like that. So we mount our motor, then our axles and our bushings. We want to do this because we want perfect alignment of everything. Now if you do this, and I have done it by itself without the axle or the bushings in there, I would do the tube first. It's fine, but what happens is when you put the bushings in, you may have a misalignment deal, and then you have to get in your file and file down a teeny bit, and then it'll work. But what we're trying to accomplish here is no resistance in the running gear. So when you do this, you're going to create very little resistance in the running gear, or no resistance. That's what you want. You don't want no resistance in this running gear, because if it binds here, then your car is not going to flow as easily. It's not going to work as nice. It's going to struggle. It may make the motor work harder. It'll get a little hotter if you have a misalignment. So this is why we do it this way. So you're going to put your 1/8 axle, your 1/8 bushings, your tube. Just measure right here and make sure you're okay. And then what we'll do is we'll solder here, and then the outside of the bushings. And that'll be it for this part. And then you could remove your axle. Now when you remove it, maybe a little bit tight. So just put a little oil and then just move it in and out, and it should be fine. That pretty much is in line. Essentially, you want this axle, if you can, when you have this tip sideways like this, if you drop your axle and it flies right out, just slides right out, that's pretty much perfect. And just work it in a little bit. If it's a little tight, a little tough, it's because everything was hot. And it will. What you can do also is pull this axle out. Polish it out a little bit with some of the cloth here, Brillo pad, or use a little very light 1000-2000 grit sandpaper and sand it a little, and your axle, and it'll be fine. We want this to flow nice and easy to go in and out. So we're going to go ahead and solder this, and that'll be our first step of this chassis build. Alright, here we are. So we're going to start soldering. We got everything set up as explained previously. It's all locked into place. Nothing will move. You have everything pinned where you need to pin it, and we're going to use our Stay Clean Acid Flux. And we got our iron ready to go. Make sure your iron, the tip is nice and clean. It's not like oxidized. You could use some tip tinner to kind of tin it to help you with melting the solder in the tip, because if this is like all really oxidized, and this is not going to solder onto your tip very well, and then you get a little bit frustrated, as I always say. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the axle tube, and all I'm going to do is put a little bit there. You could put a little bit more if you want, and that's going to soak in. And I'll put a little tip tinner just for the heck of it, just to get it nice and tinned. Then what I'm going to do is get my solder, and this is 60/40 rosin solder. And what we're going to do is I'm going to solder on the inside of this. And when I solder on the inside of this, you're going to hear a little sizzle, and you're going to see the solder flow through both sides of the tube. And you just keep the heat on and go around like this. What you're doing is that flux is allowing the solder to flow all around your axle here. Go down like that, and then remove it. I'll clean that up. See, this thing's a little dirty too. There's a little bit of junk on it. That's why it's really important to keep your tools clean. Been doing I've been doing much building. The last cars I built, I sent to Harry. But we're going to look at all of that right there and see how that has that flowed all around the tube. And that's what you're getting at. I always go on the inside because it's easier for me. You could preferably do what you want. There's nothing wrong, nothing really hard with soldering. It is the most simplest thing, and I get that for people, you know, I wish I could scratch weld. I just don't think I could solder.
You
It's
can
not
do
hard to
it!
solder. Actually, the flux does the work for you when you solder. It's not, you know, the iron and the solder itself. All you're doing is just holding the tool and applying the heat. And as you can see, just like that, just applying the heat and letting the solder do the work and the flux do the work. As long as you put the material on that you need, you're going to be a solder expert. There's nothing hard about it whatsoever. And keep adding heat because I want to make sure it goes around there. And that's it. Now I have my axle tube soldered to the motor bracket. And we're good. Now, I'm keeping this simple because you can put a little solder on the inside of the tube, but I don't want to do that because I don't want to make this too complicated. So what I'll do is I'll add a little solder on the outside of the tube here. And if you heat that other side up again, don't worry. It's no big deal. It'll just, you know, melt more, and then we're going to get solder again. Or you can even do this if you want to not put any on your soldering tip. You could just put some here and do this as well. And what I'm doing is I'm just soldering the bushing. This is a little tight because the way everything is here with this particular axle tube, because it's close to the motor bracket. And then I got that soldered on there. I'm going to do the other side. Let me clean that up a little. Clean that up. And I'll do this. I'll just leave my solder and then I don't have to, you could do this way also without putting it on the tip itself. Again, it's just working your way around everything here. See how that solder flows? That's it. This is a little bit tougher because they're really close together, but that's fine. And now you've soldered the bushings into the motor bracket. You can look around the bushing, it looks pretty good. See no problem. And that's it for the first part there. Nothing to it. Now you're on to, when you're done getting this all checked out and cleaned out, make sure it's fine. This is where you start adding your rails. And as you can see, when you add your rails, here's the back of the car. And then here's your rails right here. And that's actually pretty good. We'll have to see how the other one looks like. If it's going to pass better. If we would have used a thicker channel, I think it would have been a little bit too much. But actually that's good right there because you have your body mount pads right there that you could mount on the chassis. Or on, body pads on the chassis, and then you put your mounts on the body. So you kind of get a preview of what's going on. So that's it for this first part. We'll see you on the next part, third part, when we get it done. I hope you got this all down. If you have any questions, if you feel like free of going further and making your own frame rails and putting them on without the next part, please go ahead, man. I mean, jump in there and do it. There's nothing hard about it. Very simple to do. So that's it from Area 51 Raceway. As always, you take care and have fun racing.